Hey, what's going on there, guys? I'm back here today with another deck tech for you. So today we're going to be taking a look at a modern deck, and it's Grixis Goryo's Breach. Now, this is a red, black, and blue colored deck that is a combo style deck and also a reanimator style deck, and it plays around Emrakul, the Aeons Storm, and Griselbrand. And we're going to cheat these cards into play with two different cards that we have in here. The first one is Goryo's Vengeance, and the second one is Through the Breach. And we're going to get them onto the battlefield a whole lot sooner than our opponent can deal with them or even anticipate or expect them. So before we get to taking a look at what this deck looks like, if you guys have any suggestions for decks that you would like to see, please leave them down in the comments below, and I'll take them into consideration for future deck techs. And check out the playlists in the description below where I have all the previous decks that I've covered on the channel. So, with our creatures here in the deck, we only have two of them, and both of them are in playset form. The first one is Emrakul, the Aeons Storm, so he's a big fat 15/15 creature. He has flying, he has Annihilator 6, protection from colored spells, and if he's put into our graveyard from anywhere, we shuffle our graveyard into our library. So, Emrakul, whenever we cheat him into play, he is going to bash our opponent. They're going to have to sack 6 permanents, which especially with how early we can get them out there, our opponent's going to have a clear board. So any lands that they played, any creatures, if they're playing aggro or mid-range, anything like that, they're going to lose all of that stuff, and we're going to bash in for 15. The great thing about Emrakul is he has protection from all colored spells, so Path to Exile or any spells like that are going to do absolutely nothing because they can't target Emrakul. So Emrakul is one of those easy ways to bash in and just get the damage in. He doesn't actually win us the game unless we have Fury of the Horde and we're able to use Fury of the Horde during our second main phase. But just being able to bash in once with Emrakul can assure us that we can have more time to build up our combo again and find either another Emrakul to bring back or cheat into play, or we can go and get our Griselbrand into play and swing in with him. So Emrakul isn't always kind of a definite win, but it's a really easy way to stall out the game to the point where we can just get something else and then win the game from there if we don't have Fury of the Horde. Then we have Griselbrand. So Griselbrand is a playset 7/7 creature with flying lifelink, and we can pay 7 life and draw 7 cards. With Griselbrand, he's a little bit more vulnerable to removals such as Path to Exile, but at the same time, if our opponent doesn't have anything to actually deal with him, if they don't have their path and we get in one successful strike, then we kind of can know right from there that we can dig with Griselbrand, we can pay 7 life, draw 7 cards, we can find our Fury of the Horde, and we can use that to get another attack step. We can get another swing in with Griselbrand and just kind of rinse and repeat there until we get our opponent down to 0, which isn't way too bad. But the Griselbrand is a little bit more vulnerable than Emrakul, but you just kind of have to make do with what you have and just play out the situation based on what your opponent has and what they could potentially be doing against your creatures, if anything at all. Then we have Goryo's Vengeance, so this is one of our spells for being able to bring our legendary creatures back. So it's 2 mana, it's an instant and return target legendary creature card from our graveyard to play, and that creature has haste and it's removed from the game at the end of our turn. So Goryo's Vengeance is a easy way to cheat in Griselbrand. It's a little bit more tricky with Emrakul. With Emrakul, we can discard Emrakul from our hand into the grave. Emrakul's trigger is put onto the stack, and then we can respond with Goryo's Vengeance at instant speed and get Emrakul back onto the board and swing in with it. But Goryo's Vengeance works pretty much the best with Griselbrand just because we don't have to worry about timing, about getting everything going for us in terms of our discard spells and having the mana to do both a discard and the Goryo's Vengeance, which it's not a lot of mana, but the sooner we can do things, it's probably the better. So Goryo's Vengeance just works the best with Griselbrand. And our next card is Through the Breach, so that's also a playset for us. So it's a 5 mana, which is a lot more expensive. It's an instant, and we put a creature card from our hand into play, and that creature has haste, and we sack it at the end of our turn. So with Through the Breach, it's a more consistent way to get Emrakul into play when we don't have discard outlets, which we do still have. We have 12 ways to discard cards out of our hand, so it's never really a problem with that. But Through the Breach is just one of those ways where we're holding on to one of our fatties, and then we can pay the 5 mana, get it onto the battlefield, and just swing in with it from there. and that's the easiest way to get Emrakul in. Then we have Fury of the Horde as a playset, so this is one of those ways where we have our creature out there, but we can't really connect and make that 20 damage or 19 damage or 18 damage, depending on what your opponent's doing, how many fetches they've hit, or if they went fetch into a shock and took the damage off the shock or anything like that. There's a lot of different variables, but Fury of the Horde is one of the easiest ways to just kind of connect there and bridge the gap and just win the game if we know that our attacks are going to be successful each and every single time. So we can remove 2 red cards from our hand from the game. We remove them from the game, and that is going to be our alternate way of not paying the mana cost for it. We untap all creatures that attack this turn, and after this main phase, there's an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. So we swing in with Griselbrand, we can draw 7, find our Fury of the Horde, exile 2 red cards, play Fury of the Horde, untap our Griselbrand, and then just swing in with him again, and we can do that 3 times. We can swing in with Griselbrand once and then find 2 Furies and cast those and be able to have the game right there. So that's just an easy way to do it. With Emrakul, we don't have the digging capabilities. We can't find more cards, but if we have the Fury, it's game over from there. Fury and 2 red cards in our hand. Then we're moving into our discard outlets. So I have a playset of Faithless Looting, so it's draw 2, then discard 2, and a flashback of 3. Just 1 red for the regular casting cost, which is alright. We can cast it turn 1, and we can flash it back either turn 2 or turn 3, depending on if we hit acceleration with Pentad Prism. But it just kind of depends on it. With Faithless Looting, it's just like one of those really easy and cheap ways to discard stuff, and also dig. We have a playset of Lightning Axe. So Lightning Axe is kind of a little bit more variable because we have to have a creature on the battlefield in order to actually be able to cast it. But it's an instant speed for 1 red. As an additional cost to playing it, we can discard a card or pay 5, which we're going to be discarding one of our creatures with it. If we're really in desperate need, we can discard another card and then just get rid of a creature that is really threatening. But it deals 5 damage to target creature, so it's just like one of those kind of dual purpose cards where we can get rid of nuisance creatures and at the same time we can get our creatures into the grave, like Griselbrand, and use Goryo's Vengeance, or use Lightning Axe to get a Miraculin and then respond with Goryo's Vengeance. And then we have Izzet Charm. So Izzet Charm has a couple of different abilities, but one of the abilities are to draw 2 and then discard 2, which is pretty nice for us. It is 2 mana, it's more expensive than Faithless Looting, but it also has the ability to deal 2 damage to target creature or player. It just kind of depends on what our opponent has. If it's something that's really, really threatening or keeping us from being able to do what we're doing, then we might consider getting rid of it. Or we can counter non-creature spells as well. So if our opponent tries to use a card to look at our hand and make us discard something, and if we have high value targets in our hand that our opponent can get rid of, then we might consider countering one of those cards with Izzet Charm if it's open for us to do so. Moving away from that, we have 2 Serum Visions. So the Serum Visions is pretty plain. It's not really as impressive, but in this deck, when we have like a turn 1 play where if we play either like an island or a Steam Vents, or go Scalding Tarn, search for Steam Vents or an island, and we can play Serum Visions if we don't have a Faithless Looting. So we get to draw a card and then scry 2, and then we can look at what we have on top of our library, and we can kind of assess what the cards are going to be in the next 2 turns, or how we want to organize things for our next upcoming turn. And we can just kind of play with our hand and what we have and what we're about to receive, or what we're seeing just right off of the scry. So just 2 Serum Visions. And then I have a playset of Pentad Prism. So Pentad Prism is a easy way to play it on turn 2, get the Sunburst on there for 2, so it comes in with 2 counters. And then turn 3, we can play Through the Breach, assuming that we hit all of our lands. If we hit 3 land drops and Pentad Prism, then we're able to play Through the Breach and get one of our fatties onto the table without any problems. So the Pentad Prism is awesome for that. And it's pretty much just the easiest way to work around Through the Breach and kind of find a easier way to play it around that awkward 5 mana that it's at. So for our land base, we have a playset of Scalding Tarn, which is going to either let us search for our shock lands, or it's going to let us search for our basic lands. Kind of just depends on the scenario and how much life we can actually afford to lose in what we're searching for. If we're playing up against something that's a little bit more aggressive, we might consider searching for basics instead of searching for shock lands if we need them immediately. But we do have 3 Blood Crypts and 2 Steam Vents for our Shocklands that we can search up with the Scalding Tarn. It's always awesome to have them just to be able to kind of fix our mana depending on what we're approaching in terms of the cards that we're going to be playing in the upcoming turns. I have a playset of Blackcleave Cliffs, which is absolutely perfect for the early game whenever we're playing lands. It's going to come in untapped really early on, and that's exactly what we want. We don't need a whole lot of black for this deck, but we do need a consistent source of black for Goryo's Vengeance to be able to cast it. So Blackcleave Cliffs, just like on turn 1, being able to play like Faithless Looting or something is pretty nice for us. I have a playset of Sulfur Falls that are going to interact with our basics, also with our Blood Crypts and Steam Vents. 2 Boseiju, who shelters all. So with it, we are going to assure ourselves that our spells that are going to cheat our cards into the game aren't going to be countered. So we can tap, pay 2 life, add 1 generic mana to our mana pool, and if the mana is spent to cast an instant or a sorcery spell, that spell can't be countered by spells or abilities, which is really, really awesome. I also have one copy of it in the sideboard as well. So up against anything that is really counterspell heavy, then we can just assure ourselves that our Vengeance and our Breach are going to be cast successfully. And then we have our basics, so we just have 1 basic mountain, 1 basic swamp, and 1 basic island. So that's the main board that we have here. Now let's jump over and take a look at what options we have in the sideboard. So for our sideboard here, the first card that we have is Shattering Spree. So unfortunately for this deck, we don't have the outlet for green, so we can't run Ancient Grudge. But Shattering Spree is a really good option for us to be able to destroy artifacts. So it's destroy target artifact for 1 red, and then we can replicate for another red, and we can cast it and copy it for each time we play the replicate cost. So up against things like Affinity, Shattering Spree is just really awesome. The sorcery speed does kind of restrict us from being able to deal with stuff like Inkmoth Nexus, but at the same time, it still is going to blow up a whole lot of artifacts for us in the early game if we can't keep our combo going, if we're a little bit more stalled out and we need to buy a little bit more time for us. The Shattering Spree can definitely do that for us. I have 2 Echoing Truth, so we can return non-land permanents to our owner's hand and all other copies with the same name. So Echoing Truth is really nice for just being able to bounce back anything, but more specifically, Splinter Twin is a problem. So we don't want our opponent to have like a million copies of a creature out on the board and being able to threaten us. So the Echoing Truth is the easiest way to deal with stuff like Splinter Twin. I have a playset of Pyroclasm up against aggro, anything that's really aggressive and quick. Also up against Affinity, it's pretty nice. And Infect is another easy way to deal with Infect and not let them trample over us with all of their Infect guys before we can get anything big onto the table. So the Pyroclasm lets us deal with any small stuff. I have 1 Boseiju who shelters all, another 1 copy of it. So total we have 3 up against the control, the tempo matchups, even like mid-range that has a lot of counter spells. Anything like that with a lot of counter spells, we want to side it in and be able to assure us that our 2 ways of getting fatties onto the board are uncounterable. I have 2 Sowing Salts for the lands matchups, so Valakut and Tron. We can side in the Sowing Salts up against them, and we don't really have to worry about them if they actually get anything going. I'm more worried about Tron than I am with Valakut, just because Scape Shift takes a little while for them to actually get going, but Tron is a little bit more immediate, and then if we can go like Pentad Prism and then play Sowing Salts the next turn, then it ends up being pretty nice for us. It assures us that our opponent isn't doing anything like way too aggressive for us to be able to deal with. I have a not a playset, 3 of for Leyline of Sanctity. I used to have a playset of them, but I slimmed it down to just a 3 of. But the 3 of for it, and this is up against Valakut, up against anything with a whole lot of targeted spells and abilities. Red deck wins is kind of a nuisance as well, so we don't want our opponent targeting us with all of the deal 3 damage spells. So Leyline, we can either start the game with it in our opening hand and put it onto the battlefield, or we can actually still cast it off of Pentad Prism because we're going to have the access to any color of mana, so we can still play the Leyline if we actually really want to, if we end up just drawing it or something like that. But Leyline is an easy way to deal with stuff like red deck wins, anything with a whole lot of targeted spells, and also Scape Shift. If Scape Shift just kind of sneaks one through and is able to play a little bit quicker, then we can get our stuff going. So the Leyline is gonna make it so that Valakut can't target us, basically. And the last card that I have in the sideboard is a 2-of for Ghost Quarter. So this is up against Tron. Tron is really quick, and it is a nuisance. I don't want my opponent playing like turn 3 Worm Coil Engines or anything like that, turn 3 Karn, any fat stuff like that. I just don't want them to play it. So Ghost Quarter is nice. We can side it in over the Boseiju, so we can side out the 2 copies of it that we have in the main board, unless our opponent's playing like Blue Tron or something like that. Which it's a little bit more tricky with that, and it's kind of like a tough call to make, but generally we're going to be siding out the Boseiju, and we're going to be siding in the 2 Ghost Quarter just to be able to have something that we can deal with Tron aside from the Sowing Salt. But ultimately, yeah, the Ghost Quarter is mainly for Tron. So that's the sideboard that we have here, and that's the deck tech for Grixis Goryo's Breach. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. The entire deck list is down below where you guys can use it as a reference, and you can find out all the cards that I'm using. If you missed out on a few of them and you weren't writing them down or anything, the entire deck list is down there. Also, be sure to check out the playlists for all the different decks that I've covered on the channel. All of that's down in the description below. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at AdjumanCinejob. You guys can ask me questions, get some advice on decks and stuff like that. But until next time, guys, have yourselves a wonderful, fun-filled Magic the Gathering day.